Let's talk Avatar: The Last Airbender for a moment. Specifically, let's talk about Sokka's sexism. Recently, the cast of the live-action show, produced by Netflix, mentioned in an interview that a certain character arc will not be present. As a brief recap, when we first meet the character Sokka in the original cartoon, he is very proud of himself. He is the oldest male in his tribe and thinks highly of men and boys and loves that he is one. He flexes at his reflection in the water. He talks about strict gender roles. He is dismissive of his sister's magical abilities. He considers himself a great warrior, and this attitude carries forward for several episodes. Pretty quickly, however, Sokka gets humbled when a much better warrior shows up and throws him on the floor in front of his tribe. But this character flaw continues until episode 4, when he meets the warriors of Kyoshi, a group of powerful and skilled fighters who are exclusively women. When Sokka flaunts his self-perceived awesomeness in front of them, they also throw him on the floor and humiliate him. Sokka grapples with this for a while before choosing to humble himself and ask to join them. They are willing, but only if Sokka wears their female uniforms and their makeup. As humiliating as he might find this, he does it because he genuinely respects them. Not only does he learn from the Kyoshi warriors and become a better fighter, but he also gains a friend and eventually a girlfriend in Suki. After this, we do not hear any more from Sokka about what women should be doing and how awesome men are. This is the character arc the cast claims is no longer present in the live-action Avatar show. I have seen multiple videos throw their hats into the ring of public discourse stating that the loss of this character arc is a devastating blow for Sokka. Some hail this as a sign of terrible things to come, that the new show will disrespect the original cartoon as badly as the movie did. Still others, and a large chunk of them, find this to be a sign of woke ideology spilling into the story and tainting its legacy. Maybe all of that is true, but I don't think so. Let me start by saying that I, like many people I am criticizing, am disappointed that this character arc is not in the live-action adaptation. It is a realistic position for a proud and isolated young man to find himself in at the beginning of a life-changing journey, and it leads to some fine comedy and, more importantly, a genuine moment of self-depreciation, where Sokka's real self can come forward on his knees and shed the arrogance of his past. I wish they were not axing this particular storyline. But I do not think its absence spells doom for the whole production, and I will lay out why. The character arc, if it can be called that, is minor at best. It takes up a few minutes of 4 episodes. This isn't Sokka's defining characteristic. It isn't the final inner demon that Sokka must face before he can rise and be a warrior and a leader in the grand finale. It's not even the culmination of one season. It's a 4-episode arc that mostly functions for comedy. The showrunners and screenwriters have chosen what to prioritize. Sokka will need some reason to find himself with conflict with the Kyoshi warriors, but thinking he is better than all the women isn't necessarily it. Because it's such a small part of the story, it can be cut without long-term ramifications to the overall narrative. Now, Sokka needs to start off flawed, insecure, and proud, because these are the demons that he has to face and overcome over the course of the story, as he finds himself in more and more complicated situations. But the show isn't doomed if it doesn't first manifest as sexism. The character arc may actually be there, just not for comedy. The actual quotes are from Kiawentio, maybe saying these names wrong, the actress who plays Katara. We have this quote: "I feel like we also took out the element of how sexist Sokka was. I feel like there were a lot of moments in the original show that were iffy." From Ian Owsley, the actor who plays Sokka, we have, "There's more weight with realism in every way. There are things that were redirected just because it might play a little differently in live action." From these quotes, it seems that something is being done differently with this particular character arc, but is it being chopped out, or is it how sexist he is being scaled back? Here is another quote from the showrunner Albert Kim about how the live-action show will highlight the rise of the Fire Nation and the destruction of the Air Nomads, brutal and graphic events only hinted at in the cartoon. He says, "There was a conscious decision to show people that this is not the animated series. We had to sometimes unravel storylines and remix them in a new way to make sense for a serialized drama." Given all this, I would assert that the way Sokka's superiority shows up in the cartoon is very cartoony. No question about that. You couldn't translate any of it to a dramatic show that takes itself seriously, so the character arc where Sokka thinks he's inherently great because he is male may actually still be in the show, but it would have to fit the attitude of the production. It couldn't manifest as silly or rely on slapstick comedy. It would have to feel real, and that may be the point they're all making. While I said that Sokka's superiority was realistic for a proud and isolated young man, the cartoon shows the Southern Water Tribe being basically a family campout. There are a couple igloos, Sokka and Katara, Gran, and a bunch of kids. The live-action adaptation shows a more robust, functional society. I'm sure it will still be gutted by Fire Nation raids as in the cartoon, but it's still a village. In this setting, Sokka isn't nearly as isolated, and may have other attitudes come about from his experience at the South Pole that they can draw on to supplant his sexism. This isn't something to worry about if it grows from how the world is constructed differently. In the cartoon, Sokka's home is so simple it's basically an excuse to avoid world building. In the new show, there appears to be a lot more effort put into it. If the writers are any good, Sokka's attitudes may change because the nature of his home has changed. It's still simple, deficient, and primitive, but it's not, as I described earlier, a family campout. I'm willing to wait and see what changes arise naturally from the variation in the setting. The assertion that removing Sokka's sexism is due to woke ideas is the absolute worst take I have ever heard. Do people who make these claims not have editors or buddies to chat with? If anything, the inclusion of woke into the Avatar world would be on the side of making Sokka a toxic male in the beginning who has to lose to a bunch of women in order to grow and be a real man. Removing his sexism sounds more like a move that would be done by a head-in-the-sand conservative who doesn't want to address issues that may be troubling. If I were to make Avatar woke, I would be overpowering the female Katara, overpowering the other female Toph, making the male Avatar an immature goofball who can't get anything done without relying on his female friends, and making the older, stronger male a toxic sexist who thinks that he's all that despite not having elemental powers that every other member of the group has. Oh, and nobody would be white. Oh wait, Avatar already does that. If indeed they have chosen to remove some of these elements, that would sound like anti-woke, if anything. But as I said, it's more likely that all the stuff from the cartoon is still there, it just manifests in a more realistic way. Further, it should be noted that the guys who wrote the original cartoon, Michael DiMartino and Aaron Ahaz, I'm saying that name wrong too, are themselves progressives. We can see woke elements subtly woven into The Last Airbender. We see it more obviously in Korra, and we see it very obviously in Dragon Prince, even though only Ahaz, am I saying that better? Aaron Ahaz? Is involved in the Dragon Prince. These aren't normies or conservatives whose work is being hijacked by the evil studio execs at Netflix. These are progressives whose progressivism has been in their stories from the beginning and will continue to be present in their stories as they move forward. I'll be brief, but any ideology that manifests in storytelling without subtlety, nuance, metaphor, or at least open-ended pondering is simple propaganda. So when a story, especially a legacy story, gets taken and twisted to match the asinine bias or prejudice of some self-righteous hack pretending to be a storyteller, it is frustrating and deserves all the criticism that gets heaped upon it. However, criticizing woke has become such a go-to position for many people that every time a character walks on screen, it seems somebody is screaming about it no matter what he looks like or how he looked last time. There are real problems in our storytelling landscape, and we need to be aware of them and hit them like the most efficient game of whack-a-mole ever played, no matter which side of the proverbial aisle is being overt with their conscription of stories. But this issue, this removal of a character arc, this isn't it. This isn't something to get concerned about. All that said, I could be wrong. This TV adaptation could be a disaster. The entire audience may roll their collective eyeballs, and we may have to wait another 15 years for someone else to come along and try to tackle The Last Airbender. We will have to see. But I expect that the sexism character arc won't be a big deal after we've seen the end product. All the best to us, the beleaguered viewing audience.